happy Thanksgiving for tomorrow because we want you guys to enjoy yourselves. We're going to talk about a depressing movie that reflects our depressing times.
Absolutely.
Check it out. Also, again, give a like and subscribe. I feel like I was watching another podcast and they said that, and I was like, oh, we never really say that. So like and subscribe if you like our stuff. I mean, you guys have been, so thank you. Also, we're still doing the Indiegogo for our Followed, which is our slasher movie. I'm going to put a link somewhere. We did an interview about it. We talked about the movie making, and then we'll put the commercial at the end. If you guys want to support us, that's the best way right now. Or if you want to, take a look and say, hey, this movie might be cool, that's also acceptable. Or if you just like wasting money. Either way, all three of those options work for us.
Yeah, they're great.
But yeah, thank you guys. Let us know how you're thinking about this. But today we're covering a different kind of movie. It's a Josh pick.
A
Josh pick. He gave us some good hits. That
my
first
out. True banger, because, well, I guess we won't know how this episode does, but...
Yeah, also, I don't remember.
Yeah, we'll see.
What were the other ones that you picked?
I did... Assassin's Creed was so bad. God, what was the pre-Fallout, proto-Fallout? Boy and His Dog.
Oh, Boy and His Dog.
Which is a good movie, but no one watched that episode. So go back and watch it to vindicate me.
Go back and watch it to watch us justify that. Actually,
justify the horrible person it's about. Yeah.
Speaking of horrible people, so today we're covering 2012's Killing Them Softly, directed by Andrew. Hey, that's my name. Dominique.
Oh my gosh.
Also written by Andrew Dominique, based on the book Coogan's Trade, starring Brad Pitt, the great Ray Liotta, the late great Ray Liotta, and the late great James Gandolfini. Also starring Richard Jenkins, Scott McNairy, Ben Mendelsohn. This cast is amazing, and I'm sure they're all going to be in every scene. And also starring Vincent Catalano, who you know as the guy from The Sopranos. The Sopranos reunion, like every movie involving the mob is.
It's true, yeah. But this one really resonates because it's also about the same things as The Sopranos. So,
wow.
So it really pops off. Also, you
and a final reunion.
Your ability to pronounce names wrong actually worked in Scoot McNairy's favor, because you'd think his name is Scott McNairy, and then you're like, wait, Scoot, that can't be right. But he is really good in this, though.
Yeah.
Well, how about he scoots away? But yeah, William, why don't you tell us what this movie is about?
Well,
very complicated.
So it's a complicated plot, but it's also very simple at the same time, I guess. It's about these three guys that want to knock over a card game, and they think they're going to get away with it because the guy who runs the card game has already robbed his own card game before. So if they rob his card game again, everyone's going to think it's the guy who runs the card game. Convoluted much. But they do this job, and everyone's kind of trying to figure it out, and Brad Pitt's like a mob detective who's on the case, and that's pretty much the plot of the movie. Trying to figure out who knocked over this card game.
Yeah, it is kind of like, it seems very complicated, but it's funny because multiple characters at the beginning tell you how it's gonna go, and everyone's like, nah, we're too smart for that to happen, and then
it's mostly people arguing
really
about
whether their ideas are smart or not.
William, it would have been funny if Andrew's like, hey, what's this movie about? And you just play any like Obama or W speech from 2008 for like 5 minutes straight about like the economy. Because this movie very pointedly takes place in 2008 as Obama is, kind of being president. So it's like the transition from W to Obama.
Yeah, during the campaign.
And but it was made 4 years later, but it's very bitter in a way that I think audiences did not want to hear in 2012. They're like, no, things are going to be good under things are going good under Obama. It's like, no, things are bad, and they've been bad ever since. So it really, really works in 2024 versus when it came out 12 years ago. So yeah.
That's a good way to derail the entire podcast by mentioning the theme right at the top. I think.
So now, what's final thoughts? We'll wrap it up.
God damn, why would you bring up the theme at the very first thing?
Because like the very first scene is it's Scoot McNairy and Ben
Yeah.
Mendelsohn are in a
It is.
parking
I will
lot.
say that the movie it wears its politics on its sleeve, but it takes almost the
Yeah.
entire movie to say what it's trying to say, which is kind of why I think we should hold that conversation to the end of this episode. But yes, so it almost starts off with, or no, it doesn't almost. It does start off literally with Obama and Bush like having a speech, just to
hmm
let you know. And I think like the first time I saw it, I was like, why the fuck do they keep doing this? Because it seems kind of heavy handed until you kind of get to the end.
So
And
yeah, I
realize
mean
what
it
it's saying.
is, but it
Yeah,
is
it's
like
very heavy-handed for
Yeah.
sure.
but even like just like kind of the set dressing and stuff because it starts with like Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn are these two like scumbag lowlifes who like
Yeah,
are
just
running these
rank
terrible
one.
I should say it, Ben Mendelsohn has never looked worse in this movie.
More
He's like
disgusting.
he's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
sweating and like wearing homeless clothes and he like at the beginning of the movie he has this scheme where he's like, oh, I'm gonna steal a bunch of valuable dogs and sell them to like a dog
Purebreds.
trader in Florida.
Yeah,
It's just like
which
and,
is like kind of a good idea.
And
and
so
I'm
he's
get
kind of
do
always
that.
walking around with like multiple
like a
dogs
couple,
on a
yeah.
chain. Yeah.
But he's
Yeah,
gonna sell dogs to get some heroin to flip the heroin to like become a drug dealer. But he's clearly an addict, so you know he's just gonna do
yeah,
the heroin, and that's exactly what he does.
Yeah.
Like
He's-
and
and
it's
you
such
also
like
get fine
addict
that.
logic. Where like, no, I'll just sell the heroin instead of doing it. It's like you're gonna do it.
Yeah,
I don't.
it'll be easy. Yeah,
It's
he'll sell
also
it to
like he
to
wants
me.
to sell the dogs and they're gonna make $7,000 and then he wants to buy $500 of heroin for the year to sell. And then like his drug dealer friend is like, hey, that means you're only gonna make like $2,000 a year. And he's like, yeah, man, that's
Yeah,
good. It's like that seems like a lot of
what's
work.
wrong with that?
Even
Yeah,
like, yeah,
So they well, it starts off they're talking to the who does he play on The Sopranos, Josh?
his name is Johnny Sack, and his name is also John in this, so I just see him as Johnny Sack because he's
Yeah.
John
No,
Sacramone. He's the New York boss in The Sopranos.
In this one,
Right.
isn't his name Squirm? Who's
No,
Squirm?
his name
that's
is
his nickname.
his name is John
like, they call-
Johnny Squirrel Amato.
Yeah.
Amato, yeah.
But he's like even his like whole thing. Like they're arguing the whole time. Like he's like, and Ben Mendelsohn's being introduced to him, and he's like, "Are you gonna do this job?" And he's like, "Shut up!" And it's just like, this is such a bad idea. You all hate each other. You're clearly like not gonna
Yeah.
keep quiet about it. Like
Yeah.
you know immediately this is just not gonna like
This is
work.
bad.
Well,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
that's
all
why
bad.
it's actually good that Josh said what the theme is. So as we're talking about this, kind of think about how it relates to the theme of like multiple times in this movie, they will say like when he gets introduced, Squirrel gets introduced to Ben Mendelsohn's character, like he already doesn't really trust him because he's already talked to Scoot's character, Frankie. And so then Ben Mendelsohn is acting like a complete ass. And so he's like, listen, I've only ever worked with someone that I don't like before and it went terribly wrong. I don't like this guy. I refuse to work with people I don't like. Come back
Yeah.
on Thursday and I'll give you the details. And it's like he's literally laying out on the table like why this is a stupid idea and why
Yeah.
he thinks like it should be turned over, like they should try again or something. And then they just continue on and like multiple people in the movie keep doing that. And I think like because, and we'll like really dissect it at the end, but like because of that theme, it's gonna keep coming back around.
But like, yeah, you almost
Yeah.
like say it's deliberately blunt because we haven't said this yet, but this director also directed the greatest Brad Pitt movie ever made, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford. And that whole movie is laid out kind of similarly, where it's like, no, it's building the whole time to be like, hey, this thing's definitely going to happen. And
Yeah.
you're just
Yeah.
slowly watching it, like, why it's going to happen.
Unfold.
And like,
Yeah.
how no one's like making a choice that would like change this, you know? So I don't know. I think it's,
Yeah, it's like inevitable. It's like fate.
Yeah.
but yeah, I just love to like at the beginnings, the reason Scoot McNairy wants to do this like card game robbery is that he's like so poor. He was tried to get a job, but the job needed him to have a car. He's like, how am I going to get a car with no money? Like, he's that broke.
Yeah,
He literally can't even get like a crappy car, you know?
Also, keep in
yeah.
mind
The
that
brokenness goes deep.
Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn are huge heroin addicts. So like, it's
Yeah,
so funny
yeah.
to hear them like talk about everything because at no point are they like, "Hey, should we stop doing heroin?"
Right.
Yeah,
It
they're
never even
like,
comes up.
no,
They
like,
never even question it.
we just
Yeah,
need a little more money and life will
yeah.
work out despite our
Like
like addiction.
I'm definitely gonna
Right.
get this normal 9 to 5 job if I get a car and not if I, but I can still definitely keep doing heroin while I
We,
get it.
Yeah,
I can
no big
also say
deal.
too, because I watched this with Stephanie, my wife, and this movie notoriously like did terribly. Like people hated it; it didn't do well. There's a
Cinema
scene
score
very
F.
early on. It's just Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn in a car. Just Ben Mendelsohn BSing about how this ugly woman that he
Yeah.
barely likes, how like he like fucked her, and she was like, oh, and she would like go crazy like an alien, and he started making alien sounds.
Yeah,
Like, and then,
Yeah, yeah.
so she's like, you see why people hated this movie, right? I'm like, yeah, I understand why
yeah.
audiences are not into like watching horrible people do stupid shit for like,
Well,
you
Yeah.
know,
and I even
an
think that
hour.
relates to the theme, but I do want to mention that this movie not only did terrible in the box office, but also did very bad in the critically.
Audience,
Like
yeah,
the critic, it has an F score in CineScore. It
Hmm.
it has it like failed at the box office. I think it like was a huge loss. Yeah, it had a budget of 15, which isn't very big, and it only made 40. So
yeah,
it
and
made a little bit of a
Yeah.
budget, but not enough.
and like
Um,
it is intentionally kind of gross and slow. Like there's one woman in this movie, and she is a prostitute, and she's in 2 minutes of the movie, so you're like, okay, this is clearly just about men doing horrible things. But
yeah,
I feel like
Yeah, she
that's,
was the only female character, wasn't she?
yeah, no,
yeah.
because
Oh wow, I
I
didn't
was
know
about
that.
halfway through. I was like, I don't think there's a single woman in this. I was like, there's one. It's the prostitute.
Yeah.
They tell
But
her to
like
fuck off.
but I do feel that's intentionally like kind of like, yeah, look how awful these guys are, because they complain about women
Yeah.
Yeah.
constantly, and it's just kind of
Right, right.
showing how like awful men are when they're only around each other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it
I
really feeds back
I
into that.
think it's more. I think we're just gonna have to talk into the theme because apparently Josh will not stop talking about it. So guys, I would go check out this movie. I think it's really good, but if you have not watched it yet, this might stop to make sense. But I think like this movie is so theme heavy, like it's so in your face that it's hard to talk about this movie without kind of discussing the theme. So I would go check it out. But yeah, let's get into it. So yes, like I said, there's like the or Josh said earlier, this whole thing is kind of pigeonholed by the election, the 28 election, when it was Obama versus Bush, and it's like
Yeah.
book ended on both ends. It starts off with them in the debates, and it ends with Obama doing his acceptance speech, and so it's clearly trying to kind of draw a parallel. And I think if you look at the movie as kind of this, and The Godfather did this too, like as a metaphor for our American political system or just America in general,
Yeah.
it works a lot better, but also it's so depressing of like what he's trying to say on how like both sides are essentially the same and they're like only one side is performative, but it's who cares. And I think like people in America do not like to be told this type of stuff. They
Yeah.
do not like to be told that the Democrats are bad. But and so I think, especially in Hollywood, like you see it a lot, like with movies that are more critical of Hollywood, they get like way less critical praise, even if they're great. Um, and so I think that kind of plays into the reason. But I think that kind of stuff is important because to me, the fact that they didn't show any women is like he's making a commentary on our political system, and if he's doing that, like the
Yeah,
fact that
that's
there's no
true.
women in it is very poignant, and the fact that the only
Right.
Right.
time you either hear about women or see a woman, it's in a derogatory term or it's a derogatory phase. Either they're a street sex worker or they're talking about them like degradingly. And I think again that's all kind of tying into this idea that these guys are functioning as the American government does, and so even the women that are around, they kind of treat like shit and they treat terribly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And it's kind of like, and I almost feel like, the kind of the reason like everyone's almost like playing their part in a way that they kind of like say, because essentially the idea is, and kind of the whole thing is that Ray Liotta like runs this card game, and several years ago the card game was robbed and everyone was mad and like they beat him up, but he's like, I didn't have anything to do with it. But then like a couple years later, he's like, by the way, I did rob my own card game, but everyone kind of thought it was funny because enough time had passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now they're like, okay, if we rob it again, they'll just think it's him. And then they rob it. It's actually a really good scene, like them robbing
it's
it,
very
because
tense. Yeah.
they're so bad at it too, and like it seems like it's gonna go wrong, and they have the gross like nylon stocking faces, so just it's like the whole thing feels grotesque. But essentially like they rob this card game, and then a lot of the movie after that is like kind of Brad Pitt is kind of the problem solver brought in, and Richard Jenkins is kind of like management, like the mafia, like kind of like emissary to be like, hey, here's what you're gonna do, here's what we're gonna pay you. But it's them in the car, they meet and they instantly know, they're like, obviously it wasn't Ray Liotta, like we know it wasn't him, but obviously we're gonna have to like kill him anyway. Like it's like it doesn't matter that it wasn't him.
Right.
You have to save face.
But I think it's
He started
important
the
to point
precedent
out
of robbing card games.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out that it's not Richard Jenkins is saying no, we shouldn't kill him. And he's very confused as to why they should. And Brad Pitt is the one who's telling him,
yeah,
no, we have to, because his reputation is already so bad that he'll never come back from this event. And Richard Jenkins
he's kind of like PR
no.
for the mob in a way.
Yeah.
He's like political machination kind of guy.
And so Richard Jenkins is like, nah, just beat him up. And then Brad Pitt's like, okay, but we're gonna have to kill him. I'm telling you right now. So wasting time. And so then they go beat him up, and then they're still looking for the guys who did it. But I think like it's important. I think Jenkins is probably one of the most important characters in this movie, because he represents the voice of the elites or the mob. He's the one who's talking for all the heads. And we never see the heads, which I think is another great aspect of it. We don't even know really what kind of mob it is. Like, we just know these are criminals and this is a criminal organization. But like, they don't really act like mobsters. They're not like the cartel. So it's just kind of left hanging as to who they are. And so I think that every time they interact, it's always interesting, because it's like, here's what Richard Jenkins is saying, and here's Brad Pitt kind of giving him the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it's almost like if you've ever worked for a company that's kind of slowly going under, where you're like, oh, this company, like, everyone's about to get laid off or something. You've been in this situation where
worked. Past tense.
Yeah, not currently, all of us, right? But where you're like, oh, there's like a guy in the middle who knows exactly what's going on and how to like fix things, and then he's like basically he's frustratingly like, yeah, no, we have to do this. And that's Brad Pitt, is like this smart guy who like knows the score and like has to slowly explain it to everyone,
right,
and I feel like that's kind of a good because they even at first Richard Jenkins is like, oh, we should bring in whatever James Gandolfini's character's name is. It's like, because he's like a pro,
No. Brad Pitt wants to bring
Brad Pitt wants to bring him in. Okay.
They want to call in some guy named Dylan, who we only see for a very small portion.
Yeah.
And Brad Pitt is kind of taking over for Dylan. And then he tells them, like, the reason it's called Killing Them Softly is because he wants to bring in someone to kill Johnny Squirrels.
Amato, yeah.
And because he knows them, and he's like, oh, if I have to kill him, it's going to be kind of weird.
He gets
let's bring in James Gandolfini. And so they're like, okay, he's good. And
Mickey,
he's New York Mickey. And so James Gandolfini comes in, and he's like worthless, essentially.
Yeah, you know, right? Because
like
they meet at like a hotel, and all he's doing is kind of like whining about like why the drinks aren't like getting there quickly, and like kind of being like, oh, and my wife is like mad that I might go to prison, and he's just like
right. And
he's the mob. Yeah, he's the mob's Karen, and I love his introduction, because once he gets off the plane, him and Brad Pitt are talking, and he like he says something about the drink he has and how he doesn't like it, and so he makes the guy go get him something else. And he tells Brad Pitt like, "Hey, can I have a drink of yours while we're waiting?" And Brad Pitt's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, go ahead." And then he looks at him and chugs the entire beer
And it was full.
in
Like,
one
not one sip had
sitting
been taken yet.
for like for
that's-
no reason. It's
but
just
that-
he just
but-
wants to do it.
But I
Right,
kind of like because
right.
that scene also is like long, and it's Brad Pitt again, like the only smart guy realizing like, oh, I've made this worse. Like he's not gonna help me at all.
Yeah.
And he's almost like trying to save it. But I almost feel too like having that be like James Gandolfini is like kind of a commentary in and of himself, because near the end of The Sopranos, James Gandolfini like was out of control drinking and doing drugs, and like
Yeah.
I think like famously any scene that required food, he would actually eat the food in every take. So he would like eat like 30 hot dogs in like one day of shooting, because he's like, oh, I have to eat a hot dog in this scene. I'm gonna eat the hot dog. So to almost bring him in as like this mobster who's like there to cause a scene and just make things worse, like
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
is like I don't know. That's like cool, because like him and Johnny Sack, it's like The Sopranos is always about how like, oh, the mob's basically a corporation that's also like failing because America's failing and America
Right.
is the
Right,
mob, and
right.
it's like, okay, you're just like putting a period at the end of your commentary, like.
And I feel like
Yeah.
they even like expressly say that in this movie too. Whenever Richard Jenkins and Brad Pitt are talking in the car, and like Brad Pitt's like, "Who's running this show?" And Richard Jenkins is like, "Oh, it's a total corporate structure from the top down, and no one can make it.
Yeah.
We have no decision makers here at all."
Yeah,
And it's like that's
it's a
like those are literally
committee.
like
Yeah.
they're just commenting on like how the going to become more like a business structure. It's more dependent on
Right.
other interests besides that of like the common man, aka Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn, and they just get hung out to dry. And like that was kind of thing like with this movie, like with like the themes, it was like when it because it's so heavy-handed with the political conversations, like the actual snippets on the radio, that I kind of get into the point where I was like, okay, so who symbolizes exactly what? Like, what does James Gandolfini
Right.
symbolize? So that kind of trips
Yeah.
me up a little bit, but otherwise
Yeah.
it was pretty interesting. Not to derail, but the corporate
And
thing I thought was
I
interesting.
No, yeah, I agree.
I think one of my favorite parts about that scene is like there's a part where Brad Pitt's kind of joking with him and he's like, "Hey man, maybe don't drink anymore." And
Yeah.
James Gandolfini like gets pissed. He's like, "Hey, I've been drinking since before you were born."
Yeah.
And I think, but like I feel like that's a really good scene because it's so poignant in the like. I think we've all been with like maybe a coworker or like kind of an acquaintance, or like when we were young, me and Josh would party and one of our friends' roommates would get way too drunk and start acting crazy.
Yeah.
And you're
Mhm.
kind of like, so you're put into this mode where it's like, I mean, I don't want this guy to die or anything, but I don't really care if he like.
I'm also not his
messes up.
dad. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like not in. I don't really like. I'm not invested in this, but I obviously don't want him to be drunk or be like screaming down the street.
Right.
But
right.
also, like, I'm gonna put as minimal amount of effort as it takes, you know, to
keep him off.
get him inside.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Put it back on the couch.
and I think like that's
The
really
like the,
good.
you pat him on the back twice. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
I did my part. I patted him on the back to show I was
right.
supportive.
Like
you know?
I made sure he didn't die, but then that's about it. You know, like. And I think it's a very good. I do think that it's not as well. I think it's tough to do the 1-to-1 comparison, but I think in general, I don't know. It is kind of weird. But so then they decide like he realizes that James Gandolfini is of no help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he
then
kinda
they're
has-
going to. He has to like the whole middle section is just him hiring Mickey and then him having to deal with Mickey, and it's like completely removed
Yeah.
from kind of the main plot of the situation.
There's a lot of time where
Yeah,
we
that's what- yeah.
Gary and Ben Mendelsohn at all. They just kind of disappear
It's
for a
a,
while.
yeah, it's a red herring, but it's also like it is that like you're suddenly like, oh, okay, now this problem. Like I've made another problem I have to like fix. But I do like too that because you don't see Scoot McNairy or Ben Mendelsohn for like 30 minutes in the middle.
Yeah.
But when it cuts back to them, because they've successfully robbed this card game, right?
Mhm.
Scoot McNairy now has enough money that he like has like a car and nice clothes, and his heroin addict version of nice is like he's got the slicked back hair and this like gross like leather jacket with a hood that looks expensive but is like
Yeah.
so trashy, you know? Or it's like, oh, even when these guys have money, they're just obvious pieces of shit, you know?
Yeah. They don't know what
And
to
Ben
spend it
Middleton
on.
looks exactly the same.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he has a but But it's them, and I actually love this scene. But I was like, okay, I understand why people don't like it because they've taken heroin, and while they're on heroin, Ben Mendelsohn's like, oh yeah, I was like telling my friend Kenny about the robbery. And then he's like, wait, Kenny, who like works for the mobsters we just
Yeah.
robbed? But they both keep nodding off. But so they're like panicking, but they're too on heroin to like do anything but kind of like go in and out of it as they're like, oh, we're screwed, you know? But you know, like, and it's like, why not just have that be a dialogue scene? It's like, no, we need the tunnel vision of like going in and out.
But
Yeah, I thought that was
and
great.
I think
You know?
like
Yeah.
throughout because the movie is, and I wonder if this has also led to its kind of failure. But the movie's like almost made up of like 10 vignettes where two characters meet and then they discuss something for a
Yeah.
long period of time.
Yeah.
And then like it's like broken up by them actually like they discuss the robbery for like the first 20 minutes and then
Yeah.
they do the robbery and it takes like 5 minutes. And then they discuss the aftermath for 20 minutes and then they do the aftermath and then there's another mood. And so I do think like I think that makes it more interesting. And I think I do think there is one part where it gets way too stylized. I don't think that happens here. I do think like I could
Oh
see
no, I like
audiences
it.
getting
Yeah.
annoyed with it, but I think like it kind of makes sense on how frustrating it is. Because I think one of the things is that this movie doesn't really like sugarcoat the two like drug addicts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it does kind of like, oh yeah, if these are the people you're dealing with, this is what it would be like to deal with them.
Right.
It's not
Right.
like fun. It's not
Yeah,
like
yeah, like
cutesy, you know.
if you're ever like talking to someone on drugs trying to get them to understand something basic, it is like that. We're like, hey,
Yeah.
no, like just say yes or no to this,
Yeah.
and like,
I
are
don't
they even
know.
hearing you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am curious. Do you think the stylized part that doesn't work is the Ray Liotta scene? The very
You got it.
I hate that scene. It's the one scene I don't like in this
When
movie.
they beat him up.
No. When they shoot him and it's like the slow, like old timey music, you
I
know?
was a fan.
It's
I
like the
that
one
glass look when
like
it first got
traditional
shot.
action scene.
Yeah.
See, it's tough because that scene looks very cool. Because, like, so what happens is then they do eventually realize they have to kill Ray Liotta. So Brad Pitt pulls up next to him and he, like, waits from the turn for no real reason. And then he shoots him in the head. And it's super slow motion and, like, everything's close up. Like, you can see the hammer of the gun go off. Then you see, like, the bullet penetrate the window and it's, like, going through the rain. It looks very cool. But it's so stylized, it's kind of hard to tell what happens because like he gets shot in the car. Yeah, because he gets shot and then he like lets go of the car so it goes forward a little bit and then he gets hit by another car.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw it, I was like, "What the hell's going on?"
Right.
Yeah, it's so like it's almost like Sin City-esque with its like slow motion in the rain, and you're like, don't. But that like because it's one of two, I guess, action scenes in the movie. Which again, the cover of this movie is Brad Pitt with a shotgun. You're like, that's not the movie you're getting.
No.
You're getting Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah.
You're getting conversations.
Yeah.
And
so this is the one like scene that exists in that movie that does not like fit to me.
And I think maybe if because of the fact that this movie was kind of sold as more of an action, not even like an action movie, but more of like a No Country for Old Men.
Yeah,
it's still
like a crime thriller,
not
is
kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah. Like them kind of like having to work their way through the city to find the killers, but they really like know who it is almost immediately due to the killer's incompetence.
Right.
And so I think like that also adds to the fact that scene doesn't really work because you're like by the time you're watching it you're like starved for any kind of action, and then when it comes it's like weirdly it's kind of like the Godzilla remake where it was like, yeah, the scene is cool isolated, but in the context of the movie when I've only come to see Godzilla, I'm very annoyed that like you haven't shown me Godzilla.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? But I do, and so like so they kill him, and then they have to like then it goes to I think one of my favorite scenes where Brad Pitt goes into a bar and he finds a Scoot McNairy character, and he starts talking to him, and he's like, oh yeah, and you come in here every day, huh? And then Scoot's like, do I know you? And he's like, no, you don't know me.
I know
but
you.
I know you, and I know why you're here. You know, like, and
like,
it's very clear. But like, it's Brad Pitt talking in a very sympathetic voice, and he's just getting scarier and scarier as that scene
And
goes
Scooping
on.
Nary is like trembling, like the way that his like
Yeah,
the way he like
Yeah.
looks and like the way he's like his subtle body
Yeah.
movements were like A+. Like I was just like, holy crap.
yeah. Scoot McNair, and this is not a knock on him, but he can play pathetic loser like better than anyone else. Like in Gone Girl,
Yeah,
in this.
Yeah.
The robbery scene was like so good, like with everyone's like acting, like especially Scoop McNairy, like the way that he starts off the scene not really in control, and he's kind of like trying to figure out how to rob somebody, and then he kind of gets like really confident at the end. But just like his like emotional journey through the robbery was like so good, and like there's not that many
Where
Yeah.
he like,
it was perfect.
and I love it too. It's one of those scenes where like nothing necessarily like crazy happens, but like people like kind of put their hand under the table,
Yeah.
and he'll be like, "Hey, hands on!" But he has to say because they don't respect him, and then near the end they have the money, and then he decides to like individually start robbing people sitting at the table. You're like, "No, just take the money." You're
Don't be
like,
greedy.
"Please be a better criminal."
Yeah, this is
Like,
stupid.
stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
And he never gets very smart, let's be honest.
No. Well, and in that conversation, it's Brad Pitt kind of telling him like, "Hey, we can't find Squirrel. If you lead us to Squirrel, we'll like let you live." And then Ben Mendelsohn like gets arrested, just like isolated from.
Yeah, completely. Because he's doing this like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave some of my money in a locker and then go get like," and then it's like, yeah, of course the police are gonna notice a heroin addict walking into a building.
Yeah.
Like it just
It's obviously fucked up.
There's also, this is funny too because like at one point, like you literally don't even see one more conversation with James Gandolfini of like him, and that's when you see like the prostitute who he's like trying to pay but not tip because he's a dick. And Brad Pitt being like, "So, can I get a guy to drive you around to show you where these guys are?" And he's like, "Nah, I'm tired. I'm gonna take a nap." And you're just like, "Okay, he's useless." And then you never see him again. You just find out that Brad Pitt like called in a prostitute to get into a fight with him so he'd get arrested because he's like,
it'll be good for him,
on probation essentially. To kind of like get him out of the way. You're just like,
well,
oh, it's just a complete like.
At the beginning, he says that he's on parole and he's not supposed to.
He shouldn't have left the state. Yeah,
and he left anyway, and so it's like he's even telling you from the beginning like how worthless he is.
Yeah.
As his job. And so they arrest him and we don't find out about it. Or we don't see it.
Yeah, he just discusses it with Richard Jenkins. Yeah.
And so then Brad Pitt's like, "Okay, take me to see Squirrel and then I'll let you live." And he does take him. And he does kill Squirrel with the shotgun, which is where the poster comes out.
Yes.
And then they're like driving back and they get to a garage and Brad Pitt's kind of like, "Oh yeah, take the car over here." And then like, "We'll go get my car," and then he just pulls out a gun and shoots him too.
Right, yeah. Major headshot. It was a major headshot.
And it's like one of the cool things about this movie, even though it's not very actiony, is every time there is action, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Like those murders.
Yeah, it's like sudden and gross.
It's just like, oh my
God. See, that's what makes the Ray Liotta scenes stand out even more because you're like, well, no, you did it right. These other scenes where someone just like when he shoots John like really Squirrel, his like head pops in. Yeah.
Because I think like there's a scene earlier in the movie where when they find out that he robbed the first poker store or the first poker game, they're like, "Oh, well, we had to interrogate him," and that's the only time we see Dylan. And they just walk into Ray Liotta's house and like throw him out the window and then throw him out the back door, and then it's over. Like that's the only thing you see of it, and it's like. So the whole movie, they're kind of saying like, "Oh yeah, this violence is going to be very real. It's going to be like real life violence, which is very quick. Like if you've ever been in a fight, fights last like maybe 2 minutes. Like they're not long. You know? And so then,
except in They Live, where it lasts.
Do the opposite of that for the Ray Liotta thing. It kind of just comes out of left field.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I almost wonder if like he was like. It's so like reverential to be working with Ray Liotta on like a gangster movie that you're like, oh, I want to give him this big send off. You know? And it's just.
But see, even then, I think that goes against like one of the cool things about this movie. Like James Gandolfini is probably one of the greatest actors of all time. Same with Ray Liotta's.
No, I agree.
And they kind of treat him like their status is not. It does not matter in this movie, except for Brad Pitt's because he's kind of like the Grim Reaper. But everyone else, like even Richard Jenkins, is a little bit pathetic in this role, and like Ray Liotta's hugely pathetic. James Gandolfini is like the most pathetic
Right.
person.
It's like an
Yeah,
anti-gangster.
So it's
for sure.
very like,
Yeah,
it's definitely going against type,
Yeah.
which again makes it even less sense if that's why he did it, because it's like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of what you've been doing.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm just wondering if he just couldn't help himself.
Yeah.
Might be the
And then
case.
I think that even like just kind of going on the anti-gangster stuff, like one thing that I thought was like really good was so we were just talking about the heroin scene where Frankie finds out that Ben Mendelsohn told a guy in the mob that they did the robbery, and so Frankie's just like Scoot McNairy's like driving in his car, just like screaming, like when he's like driving like on the freeway.
Oh,
and it's like in some movies, it's like I don't know, like I feel like in The Departed, like you're not really that worried for anyone because everything is just like so action packed and crazy and kind of fun that you're like more there for the plot. But it's like once shit hits the fan for these characters, it's like there is nowhere for them to go. And it's like we have only seen very realistic violence, and so it's just like, yeah, Scoot McNairy's future is completely fucked because he never had a chance.
Yeah.
And that kind of pulls into the political themes as well, and like someone being on the bottom. But I thought that was like when I first saw this movie a long time ago, I was like, I don't really know if I like this vibe because I was kind of wanting it to be like The Departed or something.
The kind of hopeless
Yeah,
vibe.
but watching it now, I'm just like, wow, yeah, that's just someone who like lost their job and is going to be homeless, except in this version, this guy's going to go home and get shot, kind of deal. I thought it was good.
Right. I think it's good. I will say that me and William saw this movie while we were in LA, we were very much like the characters.
Brooke Cassell, depressed.
And I think I think at the jobless and hopeless. I think at the time it was kind of like this movie's pretty bleak, and I would warn that it's very cynical in its approach. It doesn't make it bad, but it is what it is. And I do think that like audiences were not expecting that, especially from the trailers, and for a good portion of it, it's kind of the whole movie is pretty funny.
Yeah.
So I think it like catches people off guard as to how.
There's even I totally forgot this the first time I watched it, but during their like kind of when they're on heroin, even before they start panicking, he like tells them a story of like, oh, after we like sold those dogs in Florida, like Kenny was supposed to like burn the car, but he like stood too close. So you just see this like little, and it's like, oh, someone's telling you a funny story that's unrelated to anything of like, oh, they like lit the car and he stood too close. So when it blew up, it like knocked him, on his ass, and you're just like, oh yeah, like what a funny scene. But like, has nothing to do with anything. But that is like these two guys bullshitting would like just kind of tell each other. And you'd like suddenly be like, oh, that is funny. Like that is a funny thing that like happens. So it's very like, I don't know, like weirdly like slice of life.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, it really does feel like just like kind of cutting 2 days out of all these people's lives, and we follow them regardless of how bad it is.
What's also kind of crazy too, I think like their like robbery is for like $50,000, which is really not enough to like die
it's
over.
100. Yeah,
it's 100.
And they're gonna split it.
Yeah,
but isn't it split between 3 people?
I would imagine.
Oh yeah, split between 3 people.
It's just like
the other two guys to split,
which is like you would make that much working at a 7-Eleven, and it's like you wouldn't make that much in one night, but it's like that's not enough money. To,
right,
like,
they're not going to be doing this every night.
Be like
they're going to take that.
For.
That's going to be their yearly.
Yeah, you know
what I mean.
And I do think that that's kind of the funny irony of it is that $100,000 is enough to cost them their lives, but it's not enough to really change their lives. Like even immediately after they commit the robbery, Ben Mendelsohn goes to Florida to sell the dogs. And I think like this was supposed to be this huge score, and they still like need extra cash.
Yeah, it's like enough that you wouldn't have to get a job for like 8 months. Like it's like like it's not even like I'm gonna go somewhere and start over.
Right,
it's like, no,
now I can pay rent.
Yeah,
I can buy a kind of nice car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like at the very end is like the most famous part of this movie, I feel, because then Brad Pitt kind of comes in and he wants his money from Richard Jenkins, and they're watching, like you can literally hear
the
Obama's
speech.
acceptance speech from the 2008 election. And like then Brad Pitt goes to count it, and he's like, hey, what the you guys are like ripping me off, and they're like, well, corporate or like the head guys are saying because of this and because of this, like
we were gonna pay Dylan 10, we were gonna pay Mickey 15, but you're filling in for Dylan, not Mickey. It's like however they can screw you,
And so then Brad Pitt is like, and then there's like a kind of flippant scene where Richard Jenkins is like, oh, you need to like pay attention to this guy because this whole job is like, it's like a networking job, you know, like it's a personality
Yeah.
job. And he's like, you need to call this one. And then Brad Pitt he says, his words are like, this is America's not a country, it's a business. And he goes, now fucking
Yeah.
pay me.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the
Right.
last time.
Last
Yeah,
line.
yeah. He's like, we're not a collective. Like, we're not. Everyone's
Right,
on their
right.
own, you know. And it's like that has been true ever
Yeah.
since then. It
And I
hasn't
think
changed a single
even
bit,
since that election, I mean, even now watching kind of Trump take over, I do think that not only is there this kind of push, and maybe it was always there, but there is this kind of more openness to being selfish.
Yeah.
You know, like they'll be right now they'll be like, oh, it's okay for poor people. I mean, for rich people to be Republicans because like they don't want to pay as much taxes. It's like, yeah, but is that the case? Like,
Right.
should they
We're still
be
getting
like? Should that be
taxed.
the
Yeah.
reason that they're stripping
Right.
our rights? Yeah, like that's kind of part of being in a society is doing taxes to kind of help that society,
Right.
and they're kind of trying to stay outside of it. And I think that this movie is kind of saying like it's that Simpsons joke, and I think people can handle it when it's a 2-second joke. It's harder to handle when it's a 2
Yeah.
hour movie. But essentially saying like, okay, you have the Republicans who are openly like screwing you over, but then the Democrats, they just discuss not screwing you over and then they screw you
Right.
over anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's the thing that it's why I think Richard Jenkins kind of represents more of the liberals, where they're saying like, oh yeah, like we don't want to kill Frankie, we love
Yeah.
Frank, or we love Ray
But we
Liotta, we
could
don't
be
want to kill him,
convinced.
just beat him up, and then
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like
And,
we're the committee has thought that, you know, this might
Yeah.
Because
work,
they're still
you know.
like oh, and you
like, because
Oh, go
they're
ahead.
still just like, pawns in this political machine. Like you don't get to be in like
Right.
this like major place of power unless like you desire that and want that, and that's different from being just like a common person who doesn't want to lead and just needs to be led. And so yeah, so it's just there's like really no difference a lot of the times between like I don't know major political players because like they're getting money from places they have
Yeah.
different interests, and so exactly what you're saying. It's just pretending to be like it's like what Bernie Sanders was saying
Well-
on this tweet, where it's like the Democratic Party has like abandoned the working man. So why wouldn't the working man abandon
Yeah.
the Democratic Party? It's like it's a one-party system, bro.
And I think it's even more poignant right now because it is that thing where like you see it like this week, if you're not watching it this week, but in time there was that senator who is the first trans
Yeah.
congressperson
Montana?
in the United States, and then I think so, and then that other's dumb congresswoman decided to like she instituted something
Do
to
like an
bar all
anti-trans
trans
Yeah.
bathroom
people
bill.
from the
Yeah.
bathroom. And then the trans congresswoman released a statement saying, "Oh, I'm not going to fall for that political game. I'm just going to ignore it and use my own bathroom." But it's like that's great
Right.
for you, but that's not great
Yeah.
for every trans person who's going to go into
Yeah.
that bathroom. And it's even like now so many pundits are like, and I don't think that any of the progressive movements or any of the inclusivity did anything to hurt the campaign for Kamala Harris. But that's the only thing that's been sane for like, oh, we need to go away from woke ideology and like pronouns. And it's like, yeah, but if you guys lean away from that, if you like decide that you don't care about the trans people and you're willing to throw them to the bus, then what difference
Right.
are you from? Like,
Yeah,
what
what's
different?
the-
Like, if anything, you just let me get beat up and then
Right.
kill me.
It's like if the-
Like, just kill me if you're
And,
gonna
like-
do it
Yeah,
eventually.
exactly.
You
And
know?
not to get like super political, like, because obviously this is also kind of one of those things too, where it's like every billionaire was like supporting like Trump, and then so Kamala's like, hey, I'll pass all the same like tax cuts.
Right.
That it's like, but that like Trump's gonna give it to them anyway. And to kind of bring it back to this movie being made in 2012, but it's about 2008 Obama is I was like super like laser focused on the 2012 election, just one of those weird moments in life where it's like Obama versus Romney. And every small business owner was like obviously like super for Romney because they're always for like the conservative. But then people would be like, yeah, but like with like after like the economy collapsed in 2008, like if anyone got saved from that, it wasn't like the working class, it was like small business owners got like a bunch of like
Right.
loans and tax credits. It's like so like your businesses like did really well under Obama. They're like, Yeah, but they would have done even better under like
It's like,
McCain.
how do
It's
you
just
know?
like, okay, so there's no
Right.
pleasing these people. They always
Yeah.
want a little more.
Because
So
American
why are
business.
you like trying to like get
Right.
them on your
And I
side?
even
Because
think
America's a
like
business. Yeah.
you even look at like kind of William said, if you look at Ben Mendelsohn and Scoot McNairy as like the general public or just like the lowest people of the
Yeah.
totem pole, it's like, but also look at how they are. They don't like kind of what just Josh just said. They are not thinking
Totally.
of
Yeah.
long term goals. Like I'm gonna make 25,000 and I'm gonna risk
Yeah.
my entire life. Maybe I should do it for a little bit more for something better. But
This
instead,
is
they're
fine.
like, nah, 25,000 is
Yeah.
good. I need a car. If I don't have a car, I can't get a job. And so I need a car right
It's
now.
more than I have
And like,
now.
it's also, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
it's also poignant that it's like, it's showing them that like, they're really
Yeah.
out of options. And I think like, it's kind of that thing where the mob and the gangs have, whatever criminal organization has kind of forced these two people to live like this. And then when they like act out based on how they've been kind of shown to live, then it's their punishment. And I think that that's, again, it's very poignant that like I mean, if I want to be unbiased, I'll say we don't know what's going to happen when Trump becomes president to business owners. But if I'm going to be realistic, they're going to be the ones who pay for it. You're going to pay for those
Yeah.
tariffs. And so it's not going to matter me as a liberal businessman and the conservative as a conservative businessman. We're both going to pay for those fucking
Yeah.
tariffs. Even like the people who aren't business people who are just buying goods. And so it's like, yeah, like it doesn't matter. Like, if they're both working against our own self-interest, then it doesn't really help when
Yeah.
like no one's looking down the road to see
Right.
what's going to happen.
I mean, there is like a hopelessness to
Yeah.
this movie, which I think is like, yeah, that's life right now. That's like been life in America. So, the last like 10 plus years, where you're just like,
Yeah.
yeah, things probably won't get better. I hope I get a job that is good.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I can't do anything about it. It is actually kind of funny to, I don't know, now that I've like mentioned Glenn Ross, it's like, that when was that
92
movie
or
made? Like
something.
early
Yeah.
90s or something like that. Yeah, it's like it's the same thing in that movie where it's like you're in a hopeless economic system which like will screw you because their leads are bad in that movie, and it's like, yeah, you just have to be really good and like get your way out of it. It's like that's Brad Pitt. It's just like, yeah,
Right.
I'm good at my job, pay me. I don't give a shit
And
what
like one
happens
man
to
has
anyone
like a stack
else,
of like good leads that could help everybody, but he just like won't give them to them in Glenn Ross. It's just like, here
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, it's like he
Yeah.
can't share it. So watch
Yeah.
Killing Them Softly and Glenn
And
Ross
I think like
together.
especially if you were alive or if you were paying attention, I don't know how old our viewers are, but if you were like around when Obama got that second term, like thinking about the idea of like during that second term, kind of like turning to like a Democrat and being like, he didn't really do that much in his last election. You like they'd be like,
Yeah.
shut the hell up. Like it's crazy how famous or like how popular Obama
Oh
was.
yeah.
And it's disappointing because like, well, it's disappointing for a lot of reasons, but it's like it's a bummer that it did not seem to matter. Like almost all his policies are like right now in contention, and it just kind of sucks that like we're in this world, and in the movie too. It's like that's what he's saying. Like we're selfish, we don't care about each other, and it's because of the fact that like when there are programs that help, they're even if they do help, they're always on the like they're teetering on as soon as someone comes in and decides they
Right.
don't like to help us
Slash
anymore,
it. Yeah.
it's gone.
Totally. It never
Yeah,
feels like it's being
And
put
yeah.
on
it's
blast.
so
It's
easy
being
to cut
held
stuff.
together with
Yeah.
threads. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that kind
Gosh,
of
that's so true.
permeates throughout the
Yeah.
whole movie. Like Richard Jenkins and Brad Pitt are just deciding everyone's lives in the same way that you talk about like picking your favorite
Right.
color.
Right.
Like, oh, let's not kill him this time because of this, or like let's try this way. And
We're
it's
talking about
like,
murder.
but that's like that's a
Right.
pretty big stake if you think about it. And I think like, and I'm not saying like that this movie doesn't have stakes. I'm saying that this movie is very willing, like the two characters are very willing to play with stakes as if they're
Hmm.
small when they're very grand, in the same way that politicians do the same thing. Like again, like that trans thing is a perfect kind of example of it, because that girl who set up that bill to keep trans people out, she's just towing the line, and right now MAGA is like super against trans people for some reason. And so, like, who knows if she really even gives a
Right.
shit
Right.
if there's trans people in the bathroom. I bet you she can't
Yeah.
even tell because, like, who's looking at other people in the bathroom? I'm trying not to. And then
Right.
you have this trans person who's like, well, I'm not going to play your political games and I'm not going to fight for it. And it's like, I know, but I didn't hire you to not fight for things that we're trying to get. I hired you
Yeah.
for the exact opposite. And so it's two people, and like one of them is super against it and one of them super for it. But at the end of the day, if I'm trans, I
Yeah.
still can't go into
Right.
a bathroom, you know. And so the person that was for it is almost more aggravating because it's like, but you know that it's wrong. Why aren't
Yeah.
you fighting? You know,
Yeah,
like,
well, yeah, because that same senator 4 years ago was like, we love gay rights, you know, like tweeting and stuff.
right,
It's like, yeah, whatever's popular, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, so it's
yeah,
all just kind of this fake PR thing that's ruining lives, but oh, it'll like help you with this like one
Right.
group of races, so
And it's like
gotta
how
do
like
it,
Brad,
you know.
and I think
like
like
how like Brad
that's
Pitt like
okay.
always like
Go
there's a
ahead.
scene where like, he's like having a beer with somebody and then like leaves the tip. And then like they're about to leave and the person that Brad Pitt was drinking with takes the tip off the table and Brad Pitt's like, leave that tip there.
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah, and it's
dollar.
just
He's
a
like,
dollar. And then he also gets mad
yeah,
at James Gandolfini for trying to screw out the prostitute for not tipping her. So like Brad Pitt's all about tipping. But then he goes and has these conversations we're just talking about where he's like, we have to murder this guy, this guy, and this guy. So it's just like, so you're really all about tipping this one
Right.
guy,
yeah.
but then you go and like all about murdering these two other dudes that you should
Yeah.
be tipping.
But that is like, but I mean, like, that is like life. Like you're like, in a way, we're all Brad Pitt being like, this system's insane, but I guess I'm like
Guess
part
I'll
of it, so you know,
Yeah,
I might as well do my job well
Yeah.
and then try to tip people, you know.
yeah. But like, yeah, and I think, you know, I just think that this movie came out at the wrong time. Like criticizing Obama in 2012 or 2008. I mean, in 2012, for even from
Yeah, at the
2008,
Yeah.
it's
height of
like
his like thing.
nobody was going to agree with you, dude. Everyone was still hopeful.
If this movie came out like literally just 10 years later, people would have been like,
Right.
this is perfect. It exactly captured like
Too
how
ahead of its
bad
time,
things
yeah.
were at the time,
Yeah.
you know. But we weren't
Yeah,
ready to
I did
hear it.
not buy this movie the first time I saw it. I thought it was very okay. But I really enjoyed watching it this
No.
last time. Yesterday I was having
Yeah,
it really hit me hard for sure.
I think, yeah, the first time I saw it, and like I said, me and William were
Yeah,
not in
that's
this
also
empty
true.
state. We were in
That's
the
amazing.
we were in the empty
For
space,
real.
as a matter of fact. Our time in LA directly led to the creation of the empty space. But yeah, I think the first time I saw it, I was very much in agreement. I thought it was too heavy-handed with the Obama stuff because I didn't really
Yeah, I didn't really
understand
know
what
much
they were
about
trying to
politics
say.
back then.
And it wasn't until watching it again that I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. And I think it was like, I think it's because in 2012, nobody was expecting the backlash that was going to happen from, you know, and it's even worse now looking at what Obama did, because it's not like he was this, you know, I think that Bill Clinton probably, even worse, but Bill Clinton probably did more progressive acts and more like helped lead the nation in a, like, put the nation in a better place than Obama did, mostly because he got so much pushback from Republicans, but regardless of the case. But at the time, nobody was expecting Trump to like emerge as the front runner and
as the
completely lead
guy,
the party
Yeah.
for the next 10 years or 12 years at this point, by the time he's done with it. And so I think like, yeah, I think people were like, no, like we're moving towards a new place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
like we're
think,
getting
like,
out of this. It's like we're not.
Yeah. And I end up
Yeah.
thinking like that's why movies like this are important, because it needs, like, someone needs to be sounding the alarm that like, hey, if Democrats or liberals keep like just saying, like, just doing the, you know, the pat on the back, you know, they might not tweet out thoughts and prayers anymore, but they don't do action, so it's
Yeah.
basically the same. And if they keep doing that, like, what's
Yeah.
gonna happen
Same old
just
stuff.
happen. You know, like,
Yeah.
you're gonna have, and whatever the reason was for why people did not come out for Harris, and like discounting the racists and the sexist, but for the normal people who didn't vote for her, it's like, yeah, like, you know, there was some places where just changing your stance on Palestine would have gotten you over the hill, and it's like,
Yeah, can't do
but
it.
because you guys never delivered for one reason or another, people didn't come out. And I think like that's what politicians should always know, but I think everyone has kind of forgotten that in the thing where it's like, no, you have to do your
Yeah.
job, like, and I think like that's what makes this movie like hit so much, and I think like that's also probably why it didn't do that good because
Yeah.
people do not like that message.
Yeah, this to me is part of my like the American Dream is dead and we live in hell like trilogy that all these movies were huge bombs is this movie, Vox Lux, and Southland Tales,
Yeah.
because I was like all those movies perfectly capture how bad America is in the 21st century, and
Yeah,
people hated
totally.
every one of them.
And I think it's important to note that like the fact that they keep referring to it as a corporation is as important as anything else, because once you kind of see America as that, it's very easy to see. Like I don't even think half of the like well, Musk is different, but like Bezos and half the politicians that were congratulating Trump, they do not agree with his stances on like racism and sexism, but they're gonna get that tax break, so they don't give a shit,
they're like, oh,
like,
if we get on his good side, he won't personally punish our company.
yeah.
It's
So it
just,
becomes that thing where it's like,
yeah,
who
it's all
cares? Like
cynical as hell.
even now, yeah. And I think like again, it's just a message that kind of needs to get out. Like eventually, like Amazon can change their Twitter profile to be a rainbow every April, but like if they're not voting and not like trying to enact change and make things
Right.
equal,
What is it really
then
doing?
who gives a shit?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's an important message. I think it's a hard message, especially for Americans to understand. Even me, it's like I'm saying it as if I'm like
Takes time
an
to get to those
outlier, but
realizations.
like, you know, I think all of us, yeah, all of us were excited about like, yeah, this is we're in for a new change, and I think those of us who kind of got sideswiped from the election this month, it's important to remember that
Yeah.
things can be easily taken away. You know, it's two guys having a conversation over a beer
Yeah.
that's going to cost your livelihood. So keep that in mind. You know?
Yeah.
Which
That's
sounds
how it goes.
depressing, and
That's
it
how
is a little bit depressing.
Hope
So
it's a good day for them.
That's life, baby. And this sucks too, because this is a great movie and you should watch it. And this is like the 1 month out of 11 where this movie's somehow not on streaming. It is on streaming all the time, but somehow it's just not right now, like on like a streaming service. So watch it, but because it's gonna be on Tubi or HBO or something within the next 2 weeks, you know.
yeah, I mean, it was literally. I didn't even check to see
I
if
thought
this
it was
was
on Max
streaming
still,
because it's always streaming. So I was like, it'll be streaming, and then this time it wasn't streaming. But if you don't want to pay for it, I would at least wait a month. It'll always be streamed, but I would check it out. It was just on Netflix last month, so
they're playing it on basic cable on Cinemax. So I imagine it's gonna go to HBO Max pretty soon.
Yeah, man, Cinemax. Remember when that was a thing?
I loved it.
I do.
I know, but well, thank you guys. This was a good conversation. Any last words on Killing Them Softly?
I thought it was really great. There are a few. I mean, I might have taken out a couple of the times when they referenced the election, but otherwise, great movie. Yeah, as you can tell by our conversation, it really sparked a lot of ideas and thoughts. So, absolutely go see it.
I would have put in even more. Yeah. No. Yeah. I will say that like. I think again that's what makes it very jarring because it's already pretty heavy-handed, and then to have that, it's just kind of like slapping you in the face with it.
Yeah, no, I love because that's like because same thing because this movie's only 97 minutes. Much like The Fountain, it has one theme and it's gonna tell you that thing and get to the point.
Yeah.
No 2.5 hours. So it's tight. It's perfectly constructed. Go see it the moment you get, and you'll understand. Politics. Movie will teach you politics. So
yeah, but good job, good pick. And then check out our Indiegogo campaign. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And next week we'll not pick a political movie, guys. Don't worry.
All the President's Men.
We've been, yeah, I know. Imagine the people who are like, I really like their Haunted series. Yeah. Let's see what other horror movies they're going to talk about. And we've just been hounding you. You know what? This is what happens when we get into the political situation. But next week we'll go back to a little bit more nice ones. But this was a good episode. Check it out. Happy Thanksgiving for those of you who celebrate. And we'll see you guys next week on the Bum Squad. Hey, over here. Yeah, go here. It's director Andrew Hutta, who made the empty space in the last ones. I'm supposed to be telling you about my new project, Fallout. There's just one little problem. As you can see, I'm in a little bit of a pickle. But don't worry, with your help, we can figure it all out. So come on, let's go. The reason he's chasing me is because he's obsessed with the subject of Fallout, Ali Axe. She's a popular streamer. She's having this very special Halloween episode, but he's gonna make it truly frightening. As the killer makes his way into the house, it's gonna be a fight to the death between Ali and her stalker, and there can only be one survivor. Fallout is going to be found footage film because we want you to be right there in the terror with Ali. We're inspired by such films as Scream, District 9, and the entire giallo genre because we really want those colors to pop, especially the blood. Okay, I think we lost. Come on, let's go. Oh, that was close. So if you haven't figured it out by now, Fallout is going to be my first slasher film. But while we do want to give you a fun, cool slasher film, Fallout wants to talk about a little bit more about parasocial relationships and about internet culture and about how the person on the other side of the screen might not be who you think they are. But to make this movie, we're going to need your help. Because this is a more ambitious project, I've started this Indiegogo so we can make Fallout the best it can be. I'm assembling an amazing team to make this movie, including working with iShape Productions, who did the super cool Rorschach vs. V short film. Your donations will be going to the effects, paying the cast and the crew, and of course, all the blood. In addition to that, if you support the film, you can get a number of perks from your name in the credit, a poster, exclusive screenings, and much more. With your help, I know we can make Fallout a unique and special type of slasher, unlike one anyone has ever seen. And the best part of it is, we'll be able to stop that killer once and for all. Yeah, that'll be cool. So donate today, before it's too late.